Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 26th meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. So glad that we're here. We're going to be talking about gifted and advanced learning, the Bridge to Excellence, our master plan, some procurement items, and then adjournment. I want to welcome Commissioner Martha Hassan, who is a special visitor appointment for this meeting. We really appreciate it because so we can have a quorum to advance the work. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Before we begin, we're going to take care of some board business. As you know, we have in the transition of leadership, we had our annual business meeting last Friday, and we're going to be now we're going to be doing committee assignments as well as leadership for various committees. We are, the committee structure for teaching and learning will be Linda Chinia, myself, Commissioner Berkeley, Commissioner Hike Hubbard for now, because her term is up. And as you know, September 25th, which was yesterday, was the deadline for new applications for the school board. So we're anticipating that she will transition off and we'll be appointing someone to this committee. So because we have 4 committee members for teaching and learning. And so one order of business is we have to nominate the new leadership, the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee. So I was going to open it up to my fellow members to seek nomination for the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee.
I move that Linda Chinia be chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee.
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. 3 ayes. Did I do my job, AJ? Gee. That's right. Woo.
Nothing like picking a commissioner who isn't here to be chair.
That's it.
I will
And
notify
Commissioner
her
Chinia
immediately.
has no idea that this has happened. We brought in
They'll teach
Martha.
you not to show up to a meeting.
Exactly. Well, wonderful. Congratulations in absentia to Commissioner Chinia, and we'll go from here. So, gifted and advanced learning update. I guess that's Mr. Jutras.
Good morning, commissioners.
Mr.
We're just, as they take their seat at the table, we just want to say we're excited about our 2 presentations today. One, the gifted and advanced learning update. We're excited about the access and opportunities that we're providing for our students across the city. And then our second presentation, the master plan, a glimpse into where we are and where we're going. So we're just really excited to present these 2 presentations to the Teaching and Learning Committee today.
I'm Dennis Jutras. I'm the coordinator of Gifted and Advanced Learning.
Hi, Laura Hanian, Director of Differentiated Learning.
So the first slide that we have was presented last year to the same body, but I do want to call attention, again, since this is a public forum, to our vision, which is that Baltimore City Schools will provide all gifted and advanced students, including twice exceptional populations, with advanced content, curricula, and activities not ordinarily found in the classroom in order to fully develop their true potential. Implementing the vision, and this basically creates the buckets of what we're going to go through for today's presentation, is identification, instruction, professional development, and evaluation. And of course, we want to focus on the strategic utilization of resources to support gifted and advanced learners, including advanced weighted dollars and federal title grants, 1 and 2.
This is actually new because we wanted to make sure it was clear how we aligned to the Blueprint for Success. And as you can see, we've pulled snippets from each of the areas: wholeness, leadership, and literacy. And some of the components include range of enrichment activities, differentiated instruction, meeting the needs of all learners, including gifted and advanced learners, and providing the latest research and guidance and accurate and comprehensive data to school leaders and staff. This is a timeline of sort of the major events since we did our last presentation in October. So it begins with our October update from last year. In December, we had the application process for the 3rd cohort, our gifted and advanced learning sites. 9 schools applied and all were accepted. in June, July, we were really excited to start a Title I initiative, so a Title I Gifted Advanced Learning Sites. And we invited 36 Title I pre-K-5 schools, and for 20 openings, and 17 responded and were accepted. And in August, we brought on 3 pre-gifted advanced learning sites, so they weren't part of the original cohort, but they are working with us, for a total of 55 schools this school year that we're working with.
I'm sorry, I just wanted clarification. So 9 schools, new GAL sites, but then the 36 Title I schools, how are they different
So
from the?
it's actually 17, 36 were invited.
Yeah, right. Okay, 70 responded.
So we were able this year to utilize Title I funds, which became really clear that that was able to be used for gifted advanced programming. So we're doing a special initiative at those pre-K-5 Title I schools, so they're pre-K-5 sites, and we're focused on those schools. So that's what's different about that, is that they're specifically funded and supported through the Title I initiative.
But they're considered different from GAL sites. Like, is it the same essential program? Its funding sources are different.
Right, yeah, so now we have, in essence, 55 gals.
Okay, thank you.
So here, we're really excited to show a map of our gifted and advanced learning sites, all 55 of them. As you'll notice, the Community Conditions Index that is in the red, that's where the low Community Condition Index is, and in there, we've really targeted, through our Title I initiative, gifted advanced learning sites in those areas. We also, some of our pre-sites, you'll notice, were in the southeast, where we did not have as much representation as we would have liked, and serving a larger EL population. So, English learner, sorry, I don't want to use acronyms, English learner population. So, as you can see, we've really been very deliberate about dispersing our gifted advanced learning sites throughout the city, and we'll continue to do so.
This slide was presented in previous presentations. I would like to call attention to the final box, though. Gifted remains a 90 to 99th percentile ability and achievement metric. Advanced is still 80 to 89th percentile. What we've added is something called talent development, and this is to support the fact that when we did the universal screening last year of every second grader in the district, we had hundreds of students that flagged as higher than average ability, but we did not yet have achievement pieces. We did not want to leave them out there as, hey, great, you have this high ability, and we're just going to wait till something happens. Instead, we're being very proactive. We have labeled them as talent development students in Infinite Campus, so schools now see that with the challenge and the task that they are to work with those students, include them in enrichment and intervention opportunities so that we can develop that talent and hopefully move some of those students to advanced or gifted levels. Regardless, they're still students that demonstrated higher than average mental cognitive ability, and we want our teachers and our school staff to recognize that and work with them as such. The instruction slide, this was presented previously, but just to recap again, in K through 5, what we expect of our GAL sites is that English, Jacob's Ladder gets infused, M squared, M cubed, William and Mary math units, science units from the Clarion Project, which I believe Laura will speak about a little bit later, and then Jacob's Ladder again has social studies elements. In 6 through 8, we've really worked hard the past several years to kind of norm our expectations around honors. We can't get to gifted programming specifically until we have normed honors and raised the expectation there. So in English, that means grade level above. Right now, it's Springboard only. We're open to other things, but right now, that's our... And College Board, if you may or may not be aware, has officially gone out and relabeled their Springboard curriculum as pre-AP curriculum, finally. So as we try to build the pathways for AP success later on in high school, engaging in a pre-AP curriculum is not a bad start. In math, we use a compacted curriculum, either through Springboard or Eureka. That's left to school choice, but the compacting is not left to their choice. iQuest, although many of you may be aware that there has been a big initiative to add iQuest to every school, and part of that was because we had piloted it in some of our GAL sites previously, had good success with it, and again, what we're hoping to do is model good best practices that should be shared across the district at all schools, not just exclusive to the rights of gifted and advanced learners. And National History Day is a component that's expected in all honors-labeled social studies classes in middle grades. So GAL sites mean that we give you a starter kit of resources. We do expect that all the GAL sites, all 55 of them, will be developing ILPs, which we'll speak a bit about again in a moment. A big change, something that we had talked about doing and finally are doing, is that we are conducting an audit of all high school honors courses. This officially, the window began in July. It closes, the end of this month is when schools are supposed to turn in what they're currently using as their honors curriculum. And then that will be reviewed by a panel of people that have taught at the high school level and or AP as well. The goal there is that our honors courses should create a nice pathway for AP success or IB diploma success as we go forward.
So, quick question.
Sure.
In looking at slide 6 and slide 7 in tandem, the predominance of assessment for eligibility is done through reading and math, and then these, or mental ability, achievement, motivation, creativity. Can you just share a little bit more about how students are placed in GAL programs for science and social studies if the assessment is purely reading and math? Or are we doing alternative identifications to get kids that might be super great with inquiry or questioning?
Well, again, the leading assessment that we use is a mental ability assessment. It's not looking at any kind of knowledge per se. It's indicating the fact that this student has the ability, sight unseen, with skill deficits that may be in place. In many cases, we have kids with skill deficits, but they have the ability to pick up this information more rapidly and should be in an accelerated, compacted kind of situation. We are not yet so sophisticated that we can target and say this kid is gifted only in science, or the asynchronous development is so high in science and much lower in social studies. We have provided guidance to schools, especially around middle grades, that if a student has flagged especially high in ELA, for example, that might also be a strong social studies candidate. Similarly, a student who's very high in mathematics may also be a very strong science candidate. I'm not going to say that we've perfected yet, and in many cases we have gone with the all-in model, which is if we've identified you as gifted, we want to expose you to each of these content areas as much as possible. At elementary levels, it's not as dire, I would say, because it's really about exposure. It's really layering in these extracurricular things within the classroom. At the middle grades with the honors, that's a little more of a higher stakes situation because you are taking a much more rigorous curriculum per se.
Thank you.
But we will continue to look at that and develop that. That is a long-term goal.
It was one of those things that parents may have been confused about and saying, wait a second, math and
No, it's
science.
it's an excellent question and
appreciate the
something that
clarification for
we wrestle with
the
ourselves.
Dennis,
Yes.
could you just please restate, what's the purpose of the audit? Is it to look at the quality and the rigor of the courses offered, or is it simply numbers? Where are we offering AP courses and how many? Because we've asked, as a committee, we've asked for that multiple times, and I've been frustrated by how few AP courses that we're offering in certain high schools. So can you just talk to me about the purpose and intent?
Certainly. The purpose is, well, first with the AP, it's to collect all of those College Board approved syllabi and to archive that, so when schools want to add an AP course, that they can reference something that's already been approved, so we can kind of norm ourselves around that. But for the honors specifically, it's about norming what our expectations are. When we call something Honors English 1, that might mean 10 different things to 10 different schools. And that was kind of the situation we had with middle grades with honors, is that we hadn't normed our expectations. So in a previous slide, I was able to tell you what honors middle grades should look like. We're hoping to do the same type of thing and be able to tell this committee, the board, the public, parents, students, when you go to Honors English 1, these are the expectations that our district has for you. In order for us to build the capacity and the successful pathways for students to reach those levels of 3s, 4s, and 5s in AP, we need those honor structures in place. And at this point in time, I can't tell you that they are or are not in place.
Just as part of this, which you're probably already thinking about, just the number of offerings per school, as well as the number of students touched per school by the coursework. Are you planning to do that in the audit as well?
Well, step one is to make sure we've normed ourselves around the curriculum. Step two is to make sure our teachers are well prepared to deliver faithful instruction of that curriculum. And then three, in conjunction with, too, is to make sure the doors are wide open to all students to have that availability. I mean, I certainly have some thoughts. I don't want the CAO to hear for the first time from me here, because he'll hurt me. He's a nice guy, but he'll hurt me.
No, it's nothing. It's not to respond in the moment, but maybe Mr. Conley and Allison can just think about that. That's something I've repeatedly. I just would like to know.
We're on the same page. Again, I've been in the district now, this is year 19 started for me. I was an AP teacher for 11 years. I'm a big supporter and fan of making sure we have wide open access to AP. But I am about, this committee has praised us in the past for being thoughtful, slow, deliberate growers of things. I would ask that we want to use the same lens here, that I could say tomorrow we're going to have AP in every high school tomorrow, and that's a problem. We will have more AP offerings with greater fidelity in the years to come. We'll also have more access to rigorous, legitimate honors courses in high school in the near future as well, to build that capacity.
I know I'm breaking. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I really appreciate the approach that that Laura and Dennis have taken to this work over time. Really, that when they are rolling things out, I know Dr. Lisa's and I have full confidence that it's being rolled out in a way that the students are being set up for success, the teachers are being set up for success, and the school leaders are. And so we're not just getting them out there just to count the number of AP courses we're trying to do it in a way that actually is setting everybody up for success. And so I think, I have great faith that that I know that Dennis has a huge sense of urgency about this. I mean, this is this has been his mantra in the organization for a long time when nobody was listening to him to push this. And so
You have to say it honestly.
sorry, Dennis, but that is the facts. I was there with you on the other side when I know that it was a little bit like speaking to an echo chamber. So he's been pushing this, and I'm confident that he has a requisite sense of urgency, but I do think we want to roll it out in the right way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm breaking my own norm by asking questions during engaging conversation, but this is something I'm really, passionate about. So I get that deliberate, thoughtful expansion, which you've shown in the GAL sites, which is actually something I think this committee can be really proud of. At the same time, sitting on this chair, as a school board member, it's been incredibly slow with the AP offerings. And what was told to me was we can't just give out AP courses. No one's saying that. We've got to train the teachers. Then we've got to spend time and put resources in training teachers, and then we don't train the teachers, and so then we got to and then what happens is we have Mervo. We have one AP class being offered at Mervo, which is one of our largest high schools. That was 2 years ago when I checked. It's I just want to make sure that we're tracking it, and that we have numbers, and we set goals, and we think about thoughtful expansion, and that part of presentations you come back and share that with us.
Absolutely. As of today, there are 26 high schools that offer honors courses and 23 schools that offer AP courses. Again, it's not consistent across the spectrum, but that is part of an AP plan that our office will be talking with the CAO, keep changing the name, at greater length about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as we do our equity mapping too, this is something we're watching very carefully. And so, this office has been one of the key offices that we've been really thoughtful about making sure we're doing that based on the fund study about choice and access to good programming, and our own look at this. So, I think we're very committed to expanding this. So we share your sense of urgency, and I agree that while we want to do it deliberately, we also don't want to be so deliberate that it's plodding. So we've got to move it more quickly.
I agree.
So in the name of just finishing out this, getting the teachers ready, getting the leaders ready, what about MYP programs to get the students ready that are not necessarily identified as gifted? So,
Well, actually, we have worked very closely with City College to become a mentor of the 3 feeder schools, which was not happening previously. So I'm happy to say that this month on the 19th, when we have district-wide PD, the 3 feeder schools will be joining City College in a norming around expectations and assessments, and we're going to continue that dialogue with them. So what had happened in the past is that,
yeah, I meant more specifically the middle years program.
yeah, as am I.
But district-wide.
He's talking about IB middle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about MYP as related to articulating through, just the general idea of middle school readiness for advanced coursework. I apologize. I should
That's okay. When you say MYP, I
Yeah.
immediately go to
Yeah,
middle years
sorry
program.
about that. I
That's
went too specific.
That's okay.
So actually, I'm actually glad you said that. I was gonna respond to not the importance and the urgency of making sure we have thoughtful high school offerings, but really the work around supporting pre-K-8 and making sure students are ready for those offerings, right? And that's really what we have focused on for the past few years, right? So in Dennis, when he went through the programming and he talked about the pre-AP curriculum and the honors offering and our guidance around honors, which I believe is in the appendix, you don't have to be gifted or advanced to be in an honors class. That is not an expectation of being in an honors course. We want our gifted, advanced, and talent development students in those courses, but we want students who want to be there, who are excited about learning. We want students that teachers see have the potential to do that. So I think everything we have done is a readiness for that. And now we're ready to really, I mean, Dennis and I both have secondary backgrounds. That's kind of where our passion is anyway. So I think we're both really excited to be moving in, and we have a great team. And I didn't actually get the chance to introduce Ray and Joyce. You guys want to wave real quick? That's the team, that's the whole team.
So I knew you were doing that work. I just didn't want the public or anyone listening to this message think, oh, you have to be identified as gifted and talented to participate.
Absolutely not, yeah.
And that was the message that was coming through, so I wanted to make sure it was clear.
Oh, I'm
Clear for the
glad you
family.
clarified. I'm glad you asked that
Thanks.
question.
No, and on the final slide that we do present, we talk about the fact that we actually want to get rid of the GAL nomenclature at some point. It's about bringing everyone up to speed and capacity of how to deal with all these students. But then we learn best practices about engaging all our students, giving them rigorous work that's appropriate to the level of expectation. And so, yeah, we want to throw wide open those doors, but be purposeful in it. Slide number 8, identification. Again, some of this was updated to the board this past spring or late winter, as it were. We've tested more than 11,000 students over the past several years. We've had more than 250, it says 200 now, but as of today it's 250 parent requests for additional assessment. As of August, when we were laying out the groundwork for this presentation, we had 3,933 identified students. You can see the breakdown between gifted, advanced, and talent development students. I'm happy to say last November, December was the first time we universally screened every second grader in the district. A total of 5,178 students participated in that, and we had 461 students flag at least above average of mental ability, so at least they're talent development students, and we can further identify them as we move on. But we also have that data to hang on to look at, to help guide and make good choices in conjunction with our students. January through May, we did an exhaustive comparison of the Naglieri scores. We've been doing the Naglieri testing now for 3+ years. So we had 10,939 students worth of data to look at. I'm happy to say that looking at 3 years of that data and almost 11,000 student results, I can tell you there's no gender bias whatsoever. I wasn't looking for that, but when we looked at the data at the highest levels and lowest levels and breakdown, we had almost equal numbers of male and female students take it, and they populated pretty much evenly across each of the 99th percentile, 98th percentile, all the way down to the first percentile. We were very cognizant, I think we mentioned this to the board before, last year we shared an article by Scott Peters on equity and excellence, which is the challenge of how do we ensure that we are providing rigorous offerings to students, but also being mindful of the fact that not all kids enter the equation at the same place, in particular students of color and students of poverty, which we're a district that has plenty of students that fit into those categories. I will say examining, using a 75th percentile measure, which is at the exiting point of the average curve of the Naglieri. If we factor in that as our cutoff point, and if we consider students who are identified by the district as free and reduced meals, I would tell you that our ratio of white students to African American students that flag get identified, it's a 1.6 to 1 ratio. We don't factor in those things, it's a 5 to 1 ratio. So we have flattened by using what is a group-specific norm, using the fact that we have students of high poverty in this district. We have flattened what was an Asian identification. This is not unique to Baltimore City. This is a national thing. The Asian students were identifying at a 17 to 1 ratio in comparison to African American students. When we factor in the socioeconomic status, that flattens down to a 3.1 to 1 ratio. Not perfect, but greatly improved. And Hispanic students were 1.7 to 1, now it's 1.4. So it's flattened. There's no single assessment that's going to give us a 1-to-1 ratio, but I want to assure the public, I want to assure this board that we are keenly aware of and sensitive to the fact that we need to provide equity to our students. We are working on providing them great programming and great curricular opportunities, but we need to make sure that we ensure the access is open and fair. And I feel reasonably comfortable that the way we have used that data has helped us move closer in that direction.
Do you have any similar data for doubly gifted students?
The twice exceptional students, honestly, we find them more after they've been identified in many cases as special education students, and then using things like the WISC, where they have IQ, there's an IQ score in there. We are fortunate enough to identify them as such. That's a good question. We're going to take note of that because I'm going to double down onto that particular thing.
And in June, we provided an English learner update, and though we don't have the population we want to see of gifted English learners, we saw an increase from 0.1% of our English learners identified to 0.7. And the NAGLI area is a nonverbal assessment, so I know Dennis mentioned it, but I just wanted to make sure that's the reason we use a nonverbal.
Two questions. Could you just provide the committee the NAGLI area assessment, like a version of one? I've never.
We can't publicly. I can share with you examples of them,
Yeah.
and they are available. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can certainly send that over to the committee.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I would just, that's something I'm interested in seeing. I didn't follow the flattening
Sure.
that you just described.
Mhm.
Can you just slow down a little bit? Because I understand what we're trying to do
Yeah.
is I think this is a very important point, that we're not restricting, we're giving access, but specifically, how are we doing that with the assessments?
Certainly.
I was listening, but I didn't completely follow.
That's okay. And if it wasn't for the fact that I spent months on an action research project, I too would have lost myself there. If we use the instrument as designed by the creators of this NAGLI area assessment, they would say that we should take the top 95th percentile and above. If we use that, we have an incredible disparity between race and poverty issues. Instead, what we've done is adopted the philosophy, which is very commonplace now in the gifted community, is to adopt group-specific norms, sometimes referred to as local norms, but this is really a group-specific norm. We're looking at students of color and students in high poverty. And so rather than using the 95th percentile as our initial measure, we've moved it to 75th percentile. We're not lowering standards, we're adapting them to meet and reflect our population of students. And as such, we're holding everyone in Baltimore City to the same expectation. And as such, what we're doing is we're leveling the playing field for all students of poverty, have as great a shot regardless of the race that they, rather than their ethnicity, or even or the race that they bring to the table. By lowering it to 75th percentile, we are casting a wider net, and we're flagging them now as talent development. We're still going to have disparity because many of the students sadly do not have the high enough achievement scores, but our goal is to work to help to nourish as much as we possibly can with the natural ability of those students. Did that help at all?
That was very clear. I didn't understand and you don't have to go down that road, but the 1.4
Yeah.
to I didn't understand how
It's okay.
that, but you don't have to, that was very clear. But just one final question about, so the way that we say that is we are lowering the entry percentile to be considered, but then the expectations when they're in the program are the same across the board, whether you're at the 90, compared to other places.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
That's a much better way of saying it. Thank you. November through December of this year, I'm happy to say that we will be universally screening our kindergarten students. I've mentioned to the board before, I've asked for several years. I'm very happy. I couldn't be any happier with the CAO and the CEO and other chiefs who have supported this work. This matches the brain research that students in poverty, in particular, the longer you delay accessing and giving them access to these kind of extracurricular and curricular opportunities, those neural pathways will atrophy. And as a district of high poverty, we own it. We know our kids. Let's give them those opportunities as soon as possible. So not only is this year 2 of universal screening, this also makes us the most proactive district in Maryland when it comes to identifying students for potential gifted, advanced learning, or talent development supports. And I'm very happy to say that and very proud of Baltimore City for stepping up to the plate. In January through May of this year, we're bringing back, for those that may remember, primary talent development. It's meant to be another way to identify students. This is a pre-K through 2 series of lesson plans created in conjunction with MSDE. We've contracted out with someone who helped to create those initial lessons. This is meant to be implemented in those pre-K through second grade classes to all students. Again, not every student's going to flag nicely on a Naglieri assessment. This is another way for us to kind of track student development through a REPI program, basically a portfolio of work, to see which students are responding above their peers regarding this very rigorous and academically challenging work, and that data will come back to our office to flag, and then again, talent development students, and then hopefully match that up with the achievement data for formal identification of advanced or gifted. ILPs, or Individualized Learning Plans, I should say. Just want to remind the board, there are 4 essential components that make up the ILPs. The big part is that there's an interest-based project or problem-based learning. We really would prefer more problem-based learning for gifted and advanced learners. It's an open, if they want to know more questions between project versus problem-based, more than happy to answer that. But we lean more towards the problem-based learning. We have used since day one for the ILP a social emotional component. We recognize the wholeness and the well-being of our students. Certainly some of our extremely gifted or profoundly gifted students may have situations of overexcitabilities, as was first articulated by Dabrowski, the researcher. The notion being that we want to make sure that everyone is keenly aware. We want to disabuse people of the notion that gifted kids are good kids and that they're the well-behaved kids. Those are the kids that traditionally have been identified. Our district, we have gifted kids all over the spectrum, and we want teachers to recognize the fact that if you've met one gifted kid, you've met one gifted kid. Please take the time to know every one of your students. We also put into the ILP, we acknowledge the fact there may be, in many cases, skill gaps. Just because you, in fact, were, especially talent development, there will be skill gaps. Advanced students will still be skill gaps. Gifted, less so, but just because you're a 99th percentile mathematician doesn't mean you're also there in ELA or social studies or science. So that's a place where we do want to address where there are additional areas that we can help build the student in that capacity. And then other interests and strengths. We do, as part of the work, have the students complete an interest survey so we can try to align the work and to their interests, keep them engaged.
We also provide a range of professional development opportunities for schools on training and identification, best practices. A couple of the best practices I'd like to highlight is on the social emotional needs of gifted learners. During CAO Academy, we did gifted archetypes, we did a summer PD series, a leadership series, and we have a differentiated cohort within the cycle of professional learning, which was really fantastic. For gifted, we provide professional development around the gifted curricula. This year, we'll also be providing it around primary talent development, which Dennis mentioned, so I won't go into detail in the interest of time. We have online modules available for schools, and the new ones are, everything that's in white is new, and so the writing of ILPs and implementing and divergent TDQs, which actually aligns to the work we did in the cycles. And then we have a cohort going through Notre Dame for gifted certification. We have about a few dozen teachers in that cohort.
Question. Can you talk to me about Springboard, math, and ELA? What's good about it? What would be improved from your perspective? I've heard a variety of feedback on Springboard, and I'm not going to color my comments, but I'd like to know that you've evaluated it, and what are the strengths, or what are things that you feel like are gaps within the curriculum?
Yeah, I'll take first stab at this, and I'll let Dennis jump in if he'd like to. I think more importantly than actually us evaluating it is that College Board has evaluated it and considers it a pre-AP curricula aligned to the AP courses. And so it's designed to prepare students for AP. So it's creating a pathway for that. And the curriculum is built out through a design model for AP courses eventually, right? So it's building those skills. I think secondly, it provides also a number of resources, including a pretty strong online community that we're trying to encourage teachers and schools to take advantage of, that have online resources for them. I think probably, just to be really transparent, it can be hard for some people because it's only a few years we've been doing it, so there's always growth and expectation. but they've been a really great partner in meeting with us regularly and talking about potential challenges or experiences we've had and making adjustments. So they make adjustments every year to the curriculum and provide support. So unless Dennis wants to add more, there's also additional information in the appendix about it if you have other questions.
Again, I would double down on the fact that it is backmapped from AP programming, and that helps to reinforce the pathways we're talking about doing. It does have a profoundly extensive online resource, including writing labs and close reading curricula supports. I think one of the other things that I've heard, because we offered this to English teachers the first year out at our initial 8 GAL sites, and all of the English teachers literally wanted it all right away. And the only thing I can say is that those schools that initially signed on continue to sign on every year for the ELA Springboard.
My one thing I would just say is if you could just, and this is a request, to survey the teachers and get specific feedback on the curriculum, what's working, the professional development that we're providing. I am concerned that it is a specific approach. I know it's College Board, I know it's back mapped, but I don't know if something's getting lost in translation with engaging. You look at it; it's a big book. You just kind of giving the book and teaching through Springboard. Is it engaging? Are teachers bought in? Are they trained effectively on it? I would just like to know that's the case. And I'm not assuming it's not, but I've heard a variety. I've heard teachers who love it, but I've also heard teachers who really don't. And I'm trying to understand what's behind it. And I know it's only been a few years, but it still has been a few years. It's been like 3 years in some sites that we've been using it. So I just would love some teacher data on that.
Certainly. I would just add to that the fact that for those first 2 years, there's one single person supporting that across the district. That was Ray Limer going into the schools. We have now looped in all the ACLs to have been trained into it. So I hear completely the notion about the fidelity of the instruction of the curriculum, but we will certainly survey teachers as well, which we did the first couple of years, but we haven't this past year.
So that could be part of a presentation that we next time do on gifted and talented, some teacher, how teachers are responding would be great.
So I want to highlight some of the supports, and especially want to highlight some of the partnerships we have. For supports, we provide differentiated modeling. We're trying, with the small team, we have to go really deep with the teachers and provide observation and support. But with partnerships, I really wanted to talk about a couple of our partnerships. The Center for Talented Youth this summer provided free programming for some of our students, which was pretty exciting. And for those of you that know, CTY programming can be quite costly, and we were very excited about that. They also have an Emerging Scholars program at Cecil and Mount Royal, but this year are providing for free to 7 or 8 schools the curriculum and the supports for them to create their own programs. This is a pretty exciting partnership that I would really, through Dennis's connection, we were able to do is the University of Maryland School of Medicine. We're partnering with the students to, as Dennis had mentioned previously, the Clarion Science Units, to provide support for those in the classroom for the students through that partnership. And of course, I do want to spend a minute on Ingenuity Project, which is providing some amazing support for our middle and high school students. This year, they've increased the number of kids from all over the city. The geographic distribution of their incoming class at Poly is much larger than it's ever been. And the classes, they've increased classes at Mount Royal and at Poly. So that partnership has been really critical for us in providing not just the STEM programming to the students, but also the mentorship that comes into it and the internship opportunities. So that's a really important partnership for us.
On the point of mentorship, I just want to clarify something that Laura had stated about the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Specifically, what we're doing is we're working with 11 schools, and we will have at least 2 University of Maryland School of Medicine students at a time working with a small group of students, no more than 5, to provide some one-on-one-ish mentorship with those students. So it won't be a push into the classroom, it'll actually be a pull out. And these are all Title I schools, and these are all pre-K 5 configured schools where they didn't normally have the resources to provide some pull-out supports. So we partnered with them to offer this opportunity and to provide some real role models and some mentorship in a very unique and genuine way. Right in line with survey, well, actually, it's another slide. So evaluation, the big
thought it was
part
that one too.
is the piece that we always talk about. One way to measure whether or not we're getting it right is whether or not the state, whether or not we're meeting the state expectations of gifted and advanced learning. I'm happy to say this past year, we had 3 schools recognized by the state of Maryland as E-GATE, or Excellence in Gifted and Talented Education Schools. We had 2 the year prior and 2 before that. So we've had 7 initially awarded E-GATE schools, which means that we lead all districts in the state of Maryland over the past 3 years when it comes to brand-new E-GATE schools. There are some districts that have had some that are up for renewal. I'm going to take it just on the surface of the first time in, you get the recognition. We've had 7, which leads all of the 24 LEAs that we have. And this year, I believe we submitted 12. We have 12 letters of intent to submit for this year. I'm not going to tell the board what I'm hoping we're going to get for this next year, but we'll be back to share good news. I'm certain that we will have some more schools. How many? We'll keep that a secret for now. Hopefully. I don't want to jinx myself.
Yeah, don't.
And then, of course, ongoing at the district level, we'll continue to monitor and look at the data. We'll continue to look at, now that we're going to test those kindergarten students, I want to do the same analysis. We look at, is it gender neutral? Are we using the right local, not local, but the right group-specific norms for that assessment? This evaluation slide ties in very much to what Commissioner Cannon was saying about surveying our teachers. We take great pride in the Gifted and Advanced Learning Office that we regularly survey our teachers and our students. So here's just a snippet. Last year we had 484 teachers complete the end-of-year survey, beginning-of-the-year survey as well at 24 different schools. Happily, 97% of those recognize that behaviorally challenged school students can be gifted. That's a major uptick from prior years and from anecdotal conversations when the old conversation used to be, he can't be gifted, he doesn't behave, or she doesn't behave. Now we have buy-in the fact that, hey, you know what, maybe I understand why they're not behaving. Maybe because they're bored. Maybe they're not challenged. Maybe they are like every other student and they have other things they bring to class with them. Gifted doesn't solve everything. 60% of the teachers surveyed expressed a desire for PD on differentiation, which we're happy to provide to them. On the downside, only 60% of teachers actively engaged in cluster grouping, which is a recommended model by the NAGC and other gifted researchers. So we're digging a little more deeply into conversations as Ray and as Joyce go into schools to find out, well, what's the reluctance? Why do you have some apprehension about that? We had 294 students respond to the survey at 16 different schools. Almost 80% say their participation in GAL services and influences their motivation. There's a nice little quote on the right-hand side, which I won't read to you. Almost 90% of the students completed the projects this year and received some differentiated work, but only 25% knew that an ILP was in place for them, which bothers us deeply because one of the key components of an ILP is that we have student voice and student choice in there. So if only 1 in 4 students that had an ILP knew that they had an ILP, that's something we have to work on, and we're very cognizant of that. This year, to improve what we're doing, we're including pre- and post measures. We're also including parent community members, which we did not previously survey. And I'm happy to say that as of this meeting this morning, we had 484, again, they make this number up, but 484 teachers have already responded, 69 parents, and 185 students for our pre-survey. Again, we want to see what their expectations are going into GAL programming and services and what they are coming out at the end of the year.
So the final slide, why did it pop up like that? Oh, our fancy arrows coming in aren't working, so just imagine they're coming down as I talk about them. So this, what's important about this slide is that we have these were the next steps and goals we had highlighted for you guys last October, and so we wanted to provide you an update on each of them. So all schools will become GAL sites. We actually have 50 plus now, which is pretty exciting. Universal screening at K, which we have begun. All high ability students get access and have formal, and despite their formal identification, that's the primary talent we have the talent development group, and we're working to even identify more through primary talent development. School-based gifted educators, sustained funding, so we're using Title I funds now to support our gifted and advanced learning students, cohesive, gifted, and differentiated curricula for K-12. We actually have begun conversations with Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth to take a look at which would be part of the conversation that, Peter, you mentioned, just around the different curricular options we have and getting feedback on it. So we've begun those conversations for them to look at that. And then a focus on secondary programming, including codifying honors and AP expectations. And as Dennis discussed, we are focused on that for this school year. And
So my only question here, and I probably should have asked it before, but this triggered it. Given the application of Title I funds to gifted and talent and accelerated learning, are we keeping track of the identification rates of kids who truly would qualify for Title I servicing? I mean, I know we're a universal district now, we don't have to fill out the farms forms, but is there a way that we're tracking that data to make sure that our kids that are in extreme poverty are also having equal access?
yeah, that's a great question. We are, part of when we started the Title I initiative and use of funds, we looked at the areas of the city. I don't know if you remember on the community index. Just go back real quick, I'm going to show you. So if you look here, we actually targeted our Title I supports to the schools that fall in the areas that are the highest poverty and that had the lowest community conditions index. And that was deliberate in ensuring that those supports actually went to those schools with those students. So that is part of our evaluation for even just selecting the programs and providing that support to those schools.
I did just suggest then that the next step would be to figure out a way, how do you make sure that within those schools, you're still targeted equitably, that it's not the 6 kids that are there that happen to come from a middle-class family that are identified.
Yeah.
I would also add to the fact that the 17 schools that were new to the Title I initiative that we're doing this year have a below-average identification rate in the first place. So we're hoping by bringing on Joyce, who has lots of experience working in yes, Joyce. So Joyce, make note, we need you to track that. But we're looking at schools, including one that had no students previously identified. So we were we opened it up to all the Title I schools, but I will say across the board, those schools we looked at had in common the fact that they had very, very few identified students. We're going to be much more deliberate and purposeful. We're going to try and ferret out every one of those students that could be identified in some capacity and make sure we support them to the full extent that we can to show that it can be done and should be done across the district.
Great. Any questions, further questions? I just want to take a moment just to say great work. Great work of this team. I remember one of the first teaching and learning committee meetings I had when we were upstairs, when Commissioner Stone was there as well, and Tina Hyke Hubbard was like, what has happened to gifted learning in the city, and what is our plan, and what is our strategy? And this is just really incredible work that actually it's not just about expansion. I think it's thoughtful, it's deliberate, it's aligned to our equity work now completely. Like, I really, really appreciate that. I know that's been a push back to us, and that you guys have responded. And I just want to thank you all as board commissioners. Like, I feel like this is something that we've gotten right. And the thing I would encourage everyone to think about, it's deliberate that it's on this agenda, because before we know it, we're going to be in the budget process, right? And the question I'd ask the CAO and Chief of Staff and Dr. Santelises and you all to think about, so what's next? Like, how can we need to, as a district, build on what works, and this is obviously a model that's working, and so just constantly thinking about what's next within the constraints that we have, but then outside, like where can we usher more resources to this work, because it's really important, and you guys have demonstrated that you can pull it off. So, congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
All right, next is the Bridge to Excellence, the master plan. Hello, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Casey Mengel. I'm the Special Assistant to the Chief Academic Officer. Sean, did you want to say anything? You good, Dita? All right. So today, what we're going to see here, and what we've seen in the past with regard to our updates to the master plan, is just an overview of what the master plan includes for us this year, the timeline for approvals and for receiving feedback from the community, etc. So just a little bit of background to start. The master plan for us, is part of the Bridge to Excellence in Public Schools Act, which was done in 2002. Largely what our master plan focuses on and has since 2015 is really those 5-year strategic priorities that were set forth by the board back in 2015. So each year annually, we then provide an update and have been doing that for the last 2 years. So what you'll see in here is much of the same types of pieces that we've seen in the past, not a lot of new information. The goal of the master plan is to really help us focus on how we're improving student achievement and eliminating achievement gaps throughout the district, and helps us to focus on and highlight how we're making adjustments to what we do with students and in schools, specifically around academics, based on data analysis. What the master plan also helps us to do is to align where we're focusing through our grant funds, particularly Title I, Title II, Title III. You'll see here highlighted is Title IV. That is a new bucket of dollars for us, and so I just wanted to call that out as a new addition to the master plan this year. So the Bridge to Excellence is based on the following House bills. So House Bill 999, 412, and then the Annotated Code of Maryland. Just to provide a quick background on each of those, House Bill 999 sets forth the requirements for us and what we need to report out with regards to our budget, our sort of budget narrative, as well as our title dollars. It also talks about our goals and objectives specifically for academics, and requires us to talk about strategies to address any disparities in achievement for our students. So again, this just outlines the requirements for the master plan each year. Likewise, House Bill 412 outlines for us the requirements on what we need to report for each of the assessments and for our general assessment strategy. So what we're going to see here today is really the overview, as I stated initially, of what is in the master plan. This does not go into every detail. The master plan will be posted in full for feedback from the community starting tomorrow. But what we're going to see today is really just the high-level overview. One thing that I would like to call out, and we'll spend a little bit of time on, is the blueprint overlay. In the past, the blueprint is new here in city schools, and so has not really been a part of the framing of the master plan. What we did this year is, in the executive summary, really worked to introduce what the blueprint is, how it came about, the theory of action behind the master plan or behind the blueprint, and started to outline the 3 areas in which the blueprint really focuses: student wholeness, literacy, and leadership. The master plan, and what is sort of highlighted in this slide in particular, the master plan does not yet really ask us to nod, if you will, to the areas of focus in the blueprint, right? The blueprint is very new, and so what we're wanting to do in this year is really ground the master plan in the focus of the blueprint. And then in subsequent iterations of the master plan, we will then be able to talk about how the work we've done within the blueprint and its associated metrics and measures of performance then are informing our master plan as we move forward. So in our executive summary to the master plan, we make sure obviously to include city schools' mission and vision, but then also really talk about how we arrived at the 3 areas of literacy, wholeness, and leadership as a result of our blueprint. In doing so, we make sure to highlight sort of what Dr. Santelises and what the rest of the district had learned, right, by going out, doing listening tours, seeing where it is that we as a district need to focus, and then just sort of goes through and highlights at a very high level where we want to focus our attention and energy, again, in the areas of student wholeness, literacy, with a particular focus on grades 3 to 5, 6 and 9, and then again in leadership, where we're really focused on our cycles of professional learning and providing high-quality professional development across the district. In addition to the sort of high-level overview and how we landed on those, 3 areas of focus, there is a bit of discussion in the executive summary about the all schools versus intensive learning sites model that is brought about through the blueprint. And so in this presentation today, we'll share just at a very high level what that does look like. But it is kept at a very high level in the blueprint, and we are hoping in next year's iteration of the master plan to be able to talk more deeply about the difference in the data that is coming out of the way in which we've implemented the blueprint. So for literacy, and again, I'm not going to go through and sort of read all of these, but we do outline within the master plan that there is going to be a difference in the supports and services that are provided to all schools, right? All schools receiving our cycles of professional learning, engaging in intensive institutes for our literacy representatives, targeted training for teachers in those specific grades, again, 3 to 5, 6 and 9, and then support for family literacy nights and community engagement activities around literacy. So we highlight that all schools will be doing this across the district. Again, in the master plan, we do highlight the intensive learning sites, which takes that all schools model a bit deeper by providing a full-time staff literacy coach in schools 4 days a week, provides weekly specialized training for those folks, quarterly on-site curriculum-based coaching by national experts, and then opportunities for those schools who participate as intensive sites to go and really see best practice elsewhere across the country. Again, in the master plan, we do the same with student wholeness, outlining that all schools will receive social emotional learning kind of 101 as part of our citywide sessions, 3 to 4 sessions or so per year, which include principals and members of their ILT teams. We will also be providing professional development for coaches and athletic directors through our Inside Out initiative, which I believe we've presented here at this committee before. And then support for student work celebration events. And training on cultural responsive teaching. At intensive sites, we highlight that again. It's what all schools are receiving, plus additional school-wide training on CASEL, which is a model for social emotional learning, as well as funds to support other blueprint work and community engagement events, and the establishment, not this year, but in the following year, of planning centers, which would include a full-time staff member to support that planning center. There are sort of 2 strands, I should have said this at the beginning, 2 strands of the student wholeness intensive sites. One is for CASEL, and the other is for restorative practices. And so there are 2 sets of intensive sites, which again, it's all schools, what all schools are getting, plus a little bit deeper. The little bit deeper in restorative practices is coaching from restorative practices consultants, assistant with implementation of restorative practices, full-day PD on that model, and at least an hour each month dedicated to collaborative community development sessions. And finally, for leadership, which as a district we have communicated really goes across both of those strands of student wholeness and literacy, right? Having the effective leadership at the helm is going to help deepen those at all schools and then again in those intensive sites. But for leadership across all schools, we're focused on, again, providing those cycles of professional learning, and the citywide sessions to deepen those. Support for principal professional learning communities, and then targeted pipeline work to really help us cement the development of teachers and staff into becoming school leaders. So the master plan takes the opportunity to provide the foundational understanding of our blueprint and starts to ground the conversation in the blueprint language and in the blueprint narrative. We do conclude with providing a high-level timeline for implementation of the blueprint, which you see here, and takes us through the fall of 2020, showing that we will be escalating from 1 cohort to 2 to 3 of those intensive learning sites. Following the sort of foundation of the blueprint in the master plan, we then talk about some of our executive summary level data for PARC. And so highlighted here is the percent of students who meet or exceeded expectations in English language arts, mathematics, the MSA Science, which I did just receive an updated set of data from MSDE, so we'll be able to update this slide in advance of the next board presentation, the HSA Biology, and HSA Government. These are the key areas that the master plan seeks us to look at and report on every year as part of the general work. So in that executive summary, we provide this highlight data. The other piece of the executive summary, we highlight our academic goals and objectives. We also highlight at a very high level our budget narrative, which again aligns to the blueprint. For our academic goals and objectives, what we wanted to do is make sure that we called out our 3-year academic goal. So by 2020, all students will be able to access complex text and tasks to critically analyze information in order to take a stance, develop a coherent written evidence-based argument, and communicate with confidence and conviction at or above grade level. This 3-year goal really anchors the academic work that we've been doing across the district in all content areas and grade levels. It also aligns to the blueprint in its focus on literacy and student advocacy. We outline the strategies that we focus on to meet this goal. Key to those are increasing teacher capacity and student achievement. And again, we're specifically looking at grades 3 to 5, 6, and 9. The development of coordinated professional development so that we can provide a coherent model of development across both district and school-based staff. And then finally, an assessment strategy which enables us to use data strategically so that we're able to adjust instruction. Highlighted here are simply the 6 key data areas that the master plan asks us to report out on every year. So what you'll see in the master plan in its full version when it's posted online is in each of these we provide a little bit of background and context. So yet again you see that same sort of highlight level data provided as an overview. We then discuss some of the key strategies that we're engaging in each of these areas. Curriculum and information about the curriculum aligned with these areas, the professional development provided, and then the assessments that are aligned in reporting out on each of these. The master plan also requires us, as noted at the beginning of the presentation, to report out on our assessment strategy. In the past, we had provided this type of chart. This is just a sample of the first page. It's, like 7 pages in length. But we outline our assessment strategy. In addition, and if you all will recall, I want to say maybe a month ago, the assessment strategy was presented here at the Teaching and Learning Committee, so we have made sure to include where we've embedded strategic updates to our assessment strategy, chiefly around interim assessments and mid of course, end of course assessment strategies and iReady here in the district. So we wanted to make sure that not only are we providing this chart, but we're providing a little bit of the context and the why around how we're trying to be strategic with the use of our assessments here in city schools. The full master plan will be provided online starting tomorrow on City Schools' website through October 6th for public review and feedback. All the responses will be compiled and will be leveraged to inform our final submission to MSDE. So here's a high-level timeline. The draft of our master plan is due to MSDE today. It will then go online tomorrow for review. From September 27th until October 6th, we'll be garnering feedback from the community. On October 10th, we are bringing it back here to the board so that we will be able to share any feedback that was brought to us by the community as well as by MSDE. They will give us their initial level of feedback, so we'll provide all updates there. The first full submission is due October 16th. From the 16th to the 27th, there's a content and technical review, which is done by MSDE. We then receive all of our clarifying questions, October 30th to 31st, and our final submission is due November 17th. The final submission would be all-inclusive, both including not just the programmatic kind of elements that we've talked about here, but also the details around each of our titled grants that are produced in various attachments to the master plan. Those are not required as part of the draft to it. In fact, all of those titled requirements are on different deadlines for draft review with MSDE. They get submitted as one package in this final concluding submission on November 17th. On December 5th is when MSDE plans to present the 2017 Master Plan Annual Update Report overall to the School Board of Education. And so that is the timeline.
Great. Any questions? Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
And I saw Mr. Parker. Come on in. Welcome. If you just want to introduce yourself and we
Yes.
can
Good
dive
morning,
in.
Commissioners. I'm Jeff Parker, Director of Procurement for the school system.
Great. So I was just going to have you talk us through. We have, looking at it right now, we have
Sure.
five items to kind of review as a committee. And just remind us of timing. Are these going tonight, Mr. Parker?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, these will all be presented tonight.
Okay.
The first,
I think there's one that's going October 10th, isn't there?
is one, I'm sorry, AJ?
I'm pulling it up now, but I'm pretty sure there's one that's going October 10th.
The Johns Hopkins grant. Item 10.01.
Okay. It's just good to know.
Thank you for the correction. So the first board letter is City Schools Community Schools Initiative with the Family League. It involves 49 schools with 28 community-based partners. The total cost of the contract is $2,369,539.
And this is most of this is to contract for the out of school time services of approved providers, right?
Correct. They provide community school services as well as out-of-school time services.
Mm-hmm. And talk me through, Mr. Parker, the funding flow for this.
So it's a cooperative funding mechanism in that the schools contribute anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000
They chip
of money from their own budget. The Family League contributes $210,000, and the city of Baltimore contributes $55,000 per school from the mayor's office and the governor's office of children.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort out how much is coming out of the school's budget versus is coming from other sources, and that's that was helpful. I'm looking at the funding sources now, so most of this is coming from individual schools, general or grant
So
funds.
typically the schools contribute $5,000 to $20,000
Yep.
out of their own budget. The rest of that comes from grants.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of 5,000 to 20,000, and then the number is big, and if you take the schools, it doesn't get up to close to that number, but maybe it does.
Some of those schools actually, external partners make up the
Yep.
difference.
Yeah, Gotcha.
So a school's contribution could actually be as low as zero, and they have external partners that come in and provide that contribution for the school.
okay, those are my only questions.
Commissioner Canham, just to let you know, this does directly align with the community schools policy.
Yeah.
That we've recently have adopted, so it is in line with that.
Yeah, and great to see that, obviously, the new ones that have been approved, right? You guys identified those. I just was looking at Baybrook, Govins, Walter P. Carter, and Calverton. Yeah, so that's exciting. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Okay. Next.
Thank you. The next contract is with Apex Learning. They provide city schools with licenses that enable students to recover high school credits in a blended learning environment. The cost for each license is $125, and we anticipate to purchase about
Oh,
825.
hold on,
licenses.
I'm seeing the College and Career Readiness Extended Learning Services next.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, either when, just to tell board members. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, we're at 10.02, which is College and Career Readiness Extended Learning Services.
Okay. Could we put that up on the board, please? So I can see it.
Oh, you do have an APEC, we'll get you. Okay, sorry, I was just confused for a sec. So there's
Okay.
total of 4 pursuers who are proposals deemed non-responsive.
Okay, could we scroll down, please? So that I see the partners or vendors. Okay. So these are 4 vendors that provide college and career readiness services to city schools. They include NIFTY, and go back to the top, College Bound Foundation, as well as Community Law in Action. Vendors have all been providers to city schools for a long period of time, some back to 2004. Each of these programs, there's an estimated annual amount for each. For College Bound, it's $1,167,000. Community Law in Action.
And Nifty. Yeah, so these are requirements, so they basically approve them, and then schools can access them if they want their services out of their school budget.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mr. Parker, just for clarification, the rationale for seeing these as a clustered group for board approval, rather than approving the allocation for College Bound and the allocation for NIFTY separately?
Right, so what we
As
did
an
was, we
example.
did a solicitation that was specific to college and career readiness programs, and so these are the respondents to that program. Just like later on in the agenda, you'll see a procurement for culture and climate. We did solicitation specifically to that, so we broke it out by the individual officer, and so that they could focus their evaluation and their selection based on their area of responsibility, and versus having it all sort of under the chief academic officer, because these services are sort of unique to the respective officer in that department.
So maybe then this is an AJ question. Is there a way to pull them apart for voting? Or do we have to vote to approve all or
I
none?
see.
It's actually a procurement question, because it went out as an RFP, it would need to be voted on together. But Mr. Parker
I mean, we could separate each one for you, and so that you could vote on each one independently, if that,
And we just get,
or
I personally
remove
observed
one.
very different results from these 3 different groups. And if we're allocating scarce resources, would prefer to resource the bucket that gets the biggest bang. But I don't know if that's possible or necessary.
So these are programs that are available to the schools and their principals
Mhm.
to decide which ones that they want to avail themselves of. Most of these are continuation of services that the school has already had and has already been provided for a number of years. If the school has the money in their budget to continue these services, then essentially this is a contract vehicle by which they get there.
So it's just offering the menu,
Correct. Just like
So then
culture
you
and
talk to
climate
you about-
is,
guiding the menu. Okay, perfect.
there's no requirement that this money be spent.
I mean, I think the College and Career Readiness Office needs to be providing support to schools to help them make choices in that menu, but ultimately it's the school's decision on which of these options they choose or which ones some of them have historic relationships, and so sometimes that's a factor, but
But to Commissioner's point, I do think that we do have a vetting process to ensure that the menu that is being created should show vendors that have a history of effectiveness with us. I think that's what you're getting at.
though I think you're specifically raising a question about a vendor that you have concerns about. So I think that Commissioner Hassan is raising concerns about within this group, that she thinks there are some that are stronger than others. And so how is that information being provided to schools to make informed decision? And are we guiding their thought process on this and providing them advice?
Yeah, and not to disparage any of the vendors, but I know that this board specifically really, really supports College Bound, as an example. Not that we don't really support the others, but then in guiding principals to say that this is where the governance would like to lead you for the biggest leverage movement for students, seeing these three together then makes it seem like we're putting forth an equal, yeah, any one of these three will be great to enhance student experience to college career readiness, where we know that we sit maybe differently on some of them.
I appreciate the comment, and I actually think, always thinking about what, what's working and putting that buttressing up and like what's, like just from our last conversation, and like how do we build on the things that are working? It is, these requirement conference, I know that we have a process to do that and a menu that we have to continue revisit, and that's when you do it, to understand what's on the menu, but it's just kind of something that we talk about with scarce resources. How do we kind of build on what's working? So these requirement contract approvals are always really tough.
I don't know if it makes sense to have Rachel potentially come to talk about kind of the process, the guidance process with schools about how we work with them to sort through. I don't mean tonight. I don't mean right now, but maybe tonight.
Yeah, either Rachel or Danny. I know, Danny, you've been intimately involved in the process, so
Oh, Rachel's back there.
Rachel's back there and Danny's sitting up there just in case.
Yeah. So I don't know if it makes sense to maybe just talk about kind of how you work with schools, or like any thoughts about going forward, how you would work with schools to give them advice about how to select vendors. Rachel's new in this position, so I think,
Yeah.
and this, I'm sure this RFP predates
Come on up,
her
Rachel.
being
Welcome.
here. But, Rachel brings a wealth of knowledge about working with schools on this kind of work, so I just don't know if you've had a chance to think about how we would provide guidance to schools.
Sure. So Danny Heller, Manager of College and Career Readiness.
Rachel Pfeiffer, Executive Director, College and Career Readiness.
So as was previously mentioned, this is a PQS process, so it is to determine programs that schools can purchase with their own budgets. So the process for evaluating this, the procurement office provided a rubric and provided us with 4 categories: the program plan, organization capacity, effectiveness, and cost. And they provided a series of criteria and a scoring rubric for each of those. So we had to see evidence in each of those 4 areas. We had to see evidence of certain elements in each of those 4 areas. And then they had a rubric, program plan. I believe program plan and effectiveness are the highest weighted categories in that process. We had a team of 3 evaluators review each of these applications. We normed on one of the applications to make sure we were looking for the same things within the rubric, that within the procurement requirements. And so that was sort of our evaluation process. As you guys mentioned, there's way different usage amongst these 3 programs across our schools, sort of already reflecting the value statement that Commissioner Hassan stated earlier between the vendors.
I would just add that in terms of how we're thinking about supporting schools, we do make these available for schools. As Jeff mentioned, there are some long-time relationships, and so we can have conversations either with a school counselor or principal as they're thinking about bringing on these programs. The other piece is that we can also have influence with the programs themselves. And so I would love to talk more, even in an offline conversation, about particular programs where there may be more concerns, because we can push those programs to see what their flexibility is in becoming more effective for our students if there are things that we can identify. I think in particular, as programs also understand that there are limited resources, and so we do have additional leverage to be able to ask them to do things that are in the best interest of our students.
Great. And one suggestion, again, it's hard, I know, but when it says on the evidence of effectiveness section, it just says that you guys evaluated them and didn't, and that they're effective. So it would be helpful to understand why we think College Bound is effective or Nifty's effective. And I know you have a 4-point criteria, but I actually, just what we're most interested in is that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing and it's doing it well. So it would be helpful to add that in the program descriptions. Okay, thank you. Moving forward, obviously. Thank you. And welcome, Rachel.
Apex Learning. This is a one-year contract for the district to purchase digital curriculum that enables students to recover high school credits. The cost of the contract is $125,000 for approximately 825 licenses.
Questions? Commissioner Hassan?
So my question with this one, Apex is something I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from teachers, and I know that it's absolutely necessary that we are meeting our overage and undercredit students' needs and our re-engagement students' needs. But I'm wondering if we've done any work either locally or through MSDE to go through and assure that Apex is in fact aligned to the Maryland Career and College Readiness Standards. They say they are, but they say they are to every state. It just sort of is like this gold stamp on the outside of the box that says we have aligned. But have we made sure that we're aligning? And then as we move towards more individualized learning programs, are we thinking Apex is a piece of that solution, or are we thinking this is a weaning off of Apex as we move forward? And so I don't know if that's a Janice question or where that goes.
Good morning, Janice Lane, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. I think the points that you brought up are part of what's embedded in the letter a little bit later, is really that we're doing some internal review right now around Apex. It has been the foundational piece that we've been using. MSDE does endorse the use and the alignment, but in the new work around the growing targets for the graduation requirements, they're also doing some internal review around what alignment goes with that, along with the more rigorous outcomes for Bridge. So that's ongoing work that we're looking at in partnering with other LEAs around what are some of those online platforms that allow the flexibility for the student. So it still follows that 80-20 model, where 20% of the instruction is by a teacher and then 80% individual, where they can do additional work online. But I'll let Laura, if you have anything additional.
That can cover it. The letter isn't included in here that I saw, and maybe it isn't. It's somewhere in the
Actually,
archives.
so if you go under evidence of need, we talk about looking at this year doing a pilot with some other programs and trying to collect information around other programs.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that
Pressure
that
test.
we're,
Yeah.
that it's working for our kids and not just seat time.
That's right. That's right. And
Or
we
really
wanna-
basic recall information, which is some of the pushback we get from teachers and students
Yeah,
on
I
this program.
that I don't suspect is the issue with Apex. They actually have a wealth of courses. Some are actually College Board approved for AP. So they have some pretty rigorous courses, but we still want to make sure that this is the right program. This makes sense for our kids. And so that review will include those considerations.
Okay, next.
The next contract is with Johns Hopkins. This is a fixed price agreement with the Baltimore Education Research Consortium to evaluate city schools' STEM achievement and Baltimore elementary schools. The cost of the contract is $52,000, and it's funded by a grant.
It's funded by a grant?
Yes, sir. Mass
Okay.
Science
That's
Partnership
what, yeah,
Grant.
it's great. We're going to evaluate this and see what's working. I just had a question about Burke itself. It says that it's a, and this is just from my knowledge, because it's come up in other conversations. It says it's a, I'm sorry, I just lost it. It's a partnership between Hopkins, Baltimore City Schools, Morgan State Community, what is actually, how is it, it's an independent agency, right? And how, it has its own board, and it's an independent nonprofit. How is Burke structured?
This is Teresa Jones, Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer. It's considered a consortium, and so there is an executive committee that comprises individuals representing these various organizations that are actually the body that essentially aligns to, here's what the research agenda is. There's a process where we review specific projects and greenlight them because they're in alignment to that agenda, but that's in essence how it works. From a funding standpoint, Burke independently does the fundraising efforts, largely from various philanthropic sources. So most of it is indeed grant funded.
So then who, so is there like an executive director of Burke who then
Yes,
kind of?
Faith Connolly.
Okay, and she sorts it out, and then she kind of works with different partners to conduct the research based on the grants and stuff, okay?
In part, but like I said, it's because it's a consortium, it's not just her as the executive director. There are other
She
parties
taps
involved
partners.
that she coordinates with
Okay.
as they're working through the various projects. And there is a process where we then review them all via the scopes of work to make sure that they are in fact in alignment with the priorities that the district has. Because in some cases, while they're leading the body of work, there's still a need for them to access resources, capacity of our internal staff. So we always want to be mindful of that before we greenlight any projects.
And when we say consortia, they are not, I hear that as independent of the district.
That
We're
is
a partner.
correct.
They are
They are-
set up as an institution that's
That
independent.
is correct. So
Okay.
they are not, quote unquote, like an arm of the district.
Right.
So we don't fully direct the agenda. The agenda is really to look at education needs as it relates to the Baltimore area. But because Baltimore City Public Schools is sort of the anchoring district within Baltimore, that is, we work very collaboratively around which projects get greenlighted and how that's done. But they are independent, and they have a history of actually doing high-quality evaluations for the various programs that are oftentimes grant-funded for the district. So there have been a real benefit for us in being able to advance the work.
Thank you, that was very clear. Appreciate it. All right, last one?
And the last one is a contract with 5 providers of culture and climate services. The estimated annual cost for these services is $3.350 million a year. City schools received 7 proposals in response to our request, 5 of which were evaluated and deemed responsive. All of the vendors have been with city schools for a number of years. Specifically, Continuous Growth has been with city schools since 2007. Holistic Life has been with city schools since 2002. Imagine Me Ministries since 2007. Concentric Education since 2013, and the Movement Team since 2013. Each of the proposals are based on the services offered and the time duration. A number of these are hourly rates based on staff that they provide to the schools.
Commissioner Hassan. Now, I appreciate they've had relationship with us in the past. And it's like, in some ways, I'm like, I don't know how advantageous that is. It's like, how effective have they been? If they've been with us in the past, have they demonstrated results? But,
So
Commissioner
just really quickly, the Imagine Me Ministries, is that a parochial organization?
I would have to get back to you on that specifically.
Just going by the name, I just wonder if there's not a church-state conflict there. Can Google it.
So like with the other example, again, these are a list of vendors that schools can choose from, and as Jeff indicated, they are ones that schools have had historic relationships with. As we, get more deeper into the blueprint, we are, as you know, focusing on restorative practices on Castle. Castle allows a range, so Castle identifies, they have a menu of various programs that they feel are consistent with Castle, so it's not as if Castle is the only thing a school would do. A school might engage in mindfulness, or there are other programs that might a restorative practice is something that, that they identify as being something that's complementary to what they do. So this is a good example, as we go into the blueprint work, we are increasingly, focusing, like the master plan showed, all of our resources towards this direction. But in the meantime, schools have existing relationships, they have work in progress, so we provide lists of vendors available, but schools that are intensive sites, for example, in Whole Child, will focus particularly on Castle and work with Castle to identify those programs that Castle has identified as being most effective. And so I think over time, you'll see these kinds of lists change to be more reflective of the blueprint, but you will see from whether it's the master plan or whether it's our PD planning, whether it's our our list of vendors, is over time they will all be more and more increasingly aligned with the blueprint. But we have some of that work has to be still built out by working with our partners like Castle to identify which of the programs we think make most sense.
But does it concern you? This locks us in that schools can choose them for up to 3 years. I mean, what's the thinking there? Like, I get the fact that if the schools have relationships, they need to continue them. We don't want to stop. But then if we're kind of locked in, that schools could choose it over time. 3 years.
Right. I mean, I think having these schools looking at these options now as part of the context that they're doing their self-assessments as part of the blueprint, they in their schools, again, that are applying for intensive sites have to go through a very process to really think through what it is they're offering and how it aligns with the blueprint. I think it's premature probably to say that nobody can work with these vendors anymore for the next 3 years when we haven't necessarily provided an alternative at this point. And we are starting to provide an alternative through Castle, but it's in the early stages. So I think, as we get further along, I would think that schools are going to be increasingly making choices that are more aligned with Castle, but I wouldn't necessarily at this point say you can only use Castle and those programs that are on their identified list. I just don't think we're there yet to make that decision.
No, that's really helpful. I actually think this is a larger conversation at the board. Like it gets down to the school-based autonomy and the choice piece as we are rolling out a blueprint where we want to actually that we think is going to be really powerful in moving students on our 3 priorities, and then within that framework, what level of choice do the schools have, or are we more directional?
Well, I think that, the blueprint is more directional. It's more guiding folks in terms of the direction we want to see them go. But again, parts of it we're still building out. So we're not at this point going to, I think it still makes sense to allow schools to continue relationships they may have as they, over time, are trained in Castle, we're advancing the work of the blueprint, and then they may begin over time to switch from some of these vendors to other ones that are more closely aligned. But this is a cultural change for the organization, so it is going to take time to have everybody make those shifts in terms of the PD they've been undertaking, the relationships they've had. So it will take time, and there will be some, transition time as well.
My only other question is, could you, the biggest one here is 2.4 million on the continuous growth, and I've just never heard of them before. Is there any way to kind of I'd like to know the list of schools where they've serviced before, and just a little bit more information about them. And our school, I basically want to know so I get it. Schools can choose. They say that they've reduced the number and provided academic support, but a little bit more of a explanation of who they are and where they are would be helpful.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'll look at it before, tonight.
Great.
Any other questions? Continuous growth. All right. Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right. And we finished 23 minutes before schedule. Anything else for the good of the order? 23 minutes back. All right. We will see you later tonight for those who are interested. And then, AJ, the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting?
It's on October 24th in this room at 9 a.m.
Chaired by Ms. Chinia.
And the deep dive discussion on park results will happen at that meeting.
Okay. Great. Thanks all. Have a good day. And thank you, Commissioner Hassan, for joining us.
10:38.